In today's video, you're going to learn how to choose the right iPad for your worship keys rig that won't break the budget. There are a lot of options to choose from, and it can be really confusing. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to make the right choice so that you have plenty of power and you're not wasting money. Let's check it out. Choosing the right iPad can be really confusing. Apple's constantly releasing new and improved models, and you might be inclined to think, I should just buy the newest and most powerful one. But that's a substantial investment. And of course, you want to make wise budgetary decisions for you or for your church. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what I think are some good options for churches to choose, and also a couple mistakes that I see some churches making. Let's talk about how Apple releases new and improved versions of iPad in general. There's been a long history with tons and tons of more powerful chips, more powerful features, and the type of connector on the iPad has changed over time as well. Up until very recently, Apple still sold iPads with the classic Lightning connector. Now, if you look at Apple's website today, they don't advertise any models that use that older, outdated type of connection. You can still buy them on the used market and they can be very affordable, but historically they are more complex for most churches. You need an adapter in order to be able to interface with your Midi and audio hardware, and it just introduces more frustration. So this is the first thing that I would say. Maybe people will disagree with me, but if I were buying an iPad for my keys rig today, in 2024, in 2025, I would not purchase any iPad with a Lightning port. Instead, you should choose a newer model with a USB-C port. So if we're ruling out all Lightning iPads, that leaves a wide range of USB-C models that have been released over the last several years. In 2020, Apple unveiled their Apple Silicon M series chip line, and these were initially available in their new Mac computers and also in the iPad Pro. That's the iPad I have in front of me that powers my everyday keys rig. This is an M1 iPad Pro. So it has the first series M chip of Apple Silicon, and it's very powerful. I love this iPad, and I've used it on stage for tons of performances, and it's what I use for my day-to-day work for Sunday Sounds. I don't have trouble getting it to do the things that I want it to do, running tons of patches with tons of sounds, as long as I have realistic expectations and I'm not doing crazy over-the-top performance with tons and tons of patches. This iPad gets the job done. Now, you could buy an older M1 or M2 series iPad Pro on the used market for a lot less now than back when this model was first released. So this is what I'd say is really the first option. Any iPad with an M series chip in it is going to be plenty powerful for using the Sunday Keys app. And there are several models now that feature this chip. On the used market, you can find older iPad Pros. Those can be great options, and you get this big screen size, which is great for hands-on control of your faders, your effects, moving through your set list when you're on stage. So that's a big benefit. And it's less expensive because you're purchasing on the used market. Now, of course, Apple does have a track record of fading out their older hardware over time. And in the last decade or so, they've been doing that more aggressively. When I say fading out, I mean they will introduce new models, and then over time, the new versions of their software will no longer support their older, more outdated hardware. So if you're considering buying an iPad that's 4 years old right now, you should be aware that you're not gonna get probably another 10 years of use out of it in terms of how long Apple supports that specific device. I would say, maybe 5 or 6 years, optimistically. Might be a little bit less than that. Apple's been more aggressive about fading out older hardware. But since you're within the Apple Silicon line with that M1 chip, I think you probably get 5 or 6 years before you'd start running into potential issues where the new version of iPad OS won't actually run on the iPad that you've bought. So that's the first place you could go, a used iPad Pro with an M series chip. Now, there are also newer models that have the M series chip in them. The last couple years of iPad Air in a smaller form factor have also had an M series chip in them, the same chip that's in this iPad Pro. So those are less expensive because they're not iPad Pros. Smaller screen, not as powerful in some other ways, but that same powerful chip running everything inside. So if you look on the used market for an M series iPad Air, you could get an even better deal than if you were going with a used iPad Pro. So if you're really on a tight budget, an M series iPad Air is probably the way that I would recommend you go if you're cool with the smaller screen size. You're also gonna get a few more years of software updates there because those iPad models are only a year or two old. The big concession is that smaller screen size. So if you're somebody that really wants a big visual on stage, wants to be able to have lots of room, these faders to be nice and big so that you have a long travel, it might not be a compromise that you're willing to make. Now let's talk about the newest options available from Apple. This is what you'd find if you went to apple.com right now and looked at the iPad options available. This is really throwing people off, folks, because right now you have an iPad Pro with the most powerful chip Apple has ever produced, the M4 chip inside of it. And people are writing into us asking, do I need the M4 chip for my Sunday Keys rig? The answer, no. You do not need the most powerful chip Apple has ever produced for running the Sunday Keys app live on stage. Remember, I'm using an M1 chip that's 4 full generations back without issue. So it could be compelling to consider buying the latest, greatest iPad Pro if you plan to use it for other things also. Like if you want to do video editing, if you want it to be, replacing your laptop, or if you want to run multiple apps at the same time. I know some of you like to run your tracks or your chord charts app or whatever else in the background while you're also using Sunday Keys. A more powerful chip means a chip that's capable of doing more things at the same time. So if that's something that's important to you, I think the M4 chip is compelling really for that reason alone. But for everything the Sunday Keys app can do right now and how well it runs on a couple generations back of Apple Silicon, if all you're gonna do is use the Sunday Keys app, I think it's honestly overkill, and you can save some money by going for an earlier model iPad Pro on the used market. Or there's one other option that's really interesting, and honestly that's why I was excited to shoot this video. In the newest iPad updates, Apple has done something brand new. The newest model of iPad Air is now available in 2 distinct sizes. You have the standard Air size, which is about 11 inches measured diagonally. So that's the standard iPad Air, and it has an Apple M series chip in it. But then you also now have a 13-inch form factor, which is the exact same size as the iPad Pro. So for the very first time, you can get the awesome screen real estate of an iPad Pro, but without having to pay that premium price that word Pro has attached to it. So you can get an M series chip inside of an iPad Air and have the same amount of screen size as what was previously only possible with a Pro series iPad. So these 13-inch iPad Pros are really compelling to me. And if I were gonna buy a new iPad for my church today, and I could afford to do so, and I wanted to make sure that I was intentional, like I'm buying new because I want it to have the maximum number of usable years in its lifetime ahead of it, I think the iPad Air in that 13-inch form factor is a really compelling option. It's less expensive than the Pro. It's not as powerful as the Pro. But remember, we don't need that. So why would we pay for power that we're not going to use? And then we're getting that beautiful 13-inch screen. Tons of tactile control area so that you have everything on screen, easy to grab, lots of room for controlling during a live performance. So honestly, I think it's a really awesome time to be in the market for an iPad for your keys rig. There are a ton of options, and there are a ton of not just like okay and then great options. There are many good options. You could go for a used M1 iPad Pro or an M2 iPad Pro from a few years back. A lot of screen real estate, plenty powerful, saving some money, but you know that you might not have as many years of lifetime ahead of it. You could go for one of the more recently released iPad Air models with one of the M series chips. These are also available on the used market, maybe even less expensive than those iPad Pros. You have more usable life because they're only a couple years old. The concession is the screen size is a little bit smaller. So if that's a deal breaker for you, that brings us to the last option, which is the really compelling line of new iPads that Apple has on offer today. Now, by the time I've released this video, or maybe by the time you're watching it, there's probably been even more changes. Apple is continuing to innovate. I've been really impressed with how they're pushing the iPad form factor forward. So leave a comment and let us know what I missed. And I'd also appreciate a comment letting us know which model of iPad you're currently using, what your experience has been, or if you choose to make a decision and purchase an iPad because of this video, we'd love to hear from you and what you chose. Hope this video was helpful. If it was, consider hitting the subscribe button and clicking that notification bell. We put out a new video each week to help you level up your keys rig at church.